A big thanks to Nanlite for sending us their light for this video. And also a huge thanks to Enclave for letting us film at their studio. Today we're going to be looking at a bunch of different lighting setups that we can do with just one light and a couple of modifiers. We want to show you the versatility that you can get out of just one light based on different placements. You will see where the lights are going through that camera up there, but we'll also try and give a bit of a walkthrough to what we're doing as we go. Now, when you're out on location, you might want to add additional lights to the background to help fill things out, but we really want to show the power of what you can do with your main light. Before we get on with the lesson, the light we're using today for this demonstration is the Nanlite 300B MK2. Taylor has previously reviewed the Mark 1 on the channel, and since then this thing has only improved. The build quality is much nicer and more solid. They have a new mounting clamp for the control box, which is now just one unit, and they even include a small amount of RGB for basic green magenta control, which will make this light a lot more versatile and give it a longer lifespan than regular non-RGB lights. This is a unique and super cool feature that we absolutely love. We'll put a link down in the description to where you can grab one for yourself. And with that said, let's get back to the demonstration.
Here we have the absolute bare minimum setup. We have a light with a dish pointed at our actress. Now you can see how harsh and offensive this light is. Imagine we were pointing this at an older actor or a model. You would see every single pore in their face, and in general it's not very flattering. This is why we use diffusion. But it is important to keep in mind that diffusion will lower the output of your source, and you will need to compensate. Now, harsh light has its place, but you can't use it for everything. Here we are using a very small white net to add some diffusion between our source and our actress, and you can see that the difference that it makes is massive.
So what we're looking at here today is a basic interview setup that you could use for corporate work or for a documentary shoot, anything like that. And what we've done here is we've got a key light coming from just behind the camera, so we're still shooting the shadow side of the subject. We've got a 120 centimeter parabolic softbox, and then we've got a bounce on the left side of camera just to fill things in so things aren't too dramatic as a starting point. The really good things to remember about this sort of setup is to try and get the light across enough so you get a little bit of shadow on the cheek, especially trying to get that triangle under the eyes, and just really trying to make sure we get that little bit of a shine in the eye so she really looks alive. This is honestly my go-to interview setup. Now, just to show a point of difference, we've moved the bounce out, and you can see that the shadow side has gotten a little bit darker. Now, if you are in a less controlled environment, or you're shooting in daytime with light coming through the windows, you might actually want to walk in some negative fill. But because we're working in a very controlled environment, we don't need that today.
Here we are just demonstrating what a grid does. We've added the grid to our light. It's exactly the same setup as before, but you can see that it really controls the spill of the light, so it's not hitting the back wall. Now, it is important to keep in mind that if you are using a grid, depending on your source, it will take about 20 to 40% of the output away. So you need to compensate for that with either more output or change camera settings. I'm going to have Shane turn the light away and back towards the actress, just so you can see how controllable that beam of light is. Now, what we've done is we've switched over to a much smaller softbox. We've done this to express the main principle of lighting, which is the smaller and further away a source of light is, the harsher that light is going to be on your subject. The closer and bigger that it is, the softer it will be. So now we'll move the light closer, and you can see the dramatic difference that it's made. Not only is the image more dramatic because it's closer and we're getting less spill on the wall, but it's actually a lot softer as well. And this is because it's much closer to our subject. Our next setup is something that generally I avoid doing. We call this beauty lighting. This is when the light is placed just behind camera, illuminating the face completely evenly, and we get rid of most shadows on the face. Now, the reason we avoid doing this is mostly because it makes the image quite flat and not all that interesting. Remember, generally having shadows towards camera is the first key to make things look interesting. But there is a time and place for this. You might see this in some Hollywood movies where they want their character to seem innocent or gorgeous or naturally beautiful. I myself have used this for some interviews where I'm dealing with an older lady or just a person who's very self-conscious about how they look, and this can make them look a lot more attractive because it does hide a lot of the flaws in the face.
To help us have a visual indication of what we're doing as we're working, we're using an Accsoon cineeye wireless video transmitter. Accsoon did send these out to us for a previous review, and we've really enjoyed them. It's really great because it has a phone app. The app has a bunch of assist tools, and you can connect up to 4 devices at once. Today, we're shooting in a CBD area, which means that there could be quite a bit of interference. But luckily, the Accsoon does feature dual-band wireless, which means that it's a lot less likely that there's going to be any sort of interference. They've been a big help today, and we'll leave a link down in the description to where you can pick up your own. And with that said, let's get back to the demonstration. What we're looking at here is a very basic book light setup. We've got the light low, close to the ground, and we're bouncing it off of a big white frame through 2 layers of diffusion, and it gives us a very soft wraparound on the face. There are a couple of benefits to this other than the softness. For example, it actually doesn't take up a lot of depth when you set up a book light, and a lot of cinematographers actually really enjoy that. With a book light, because you're increasing the size of the source because you're bouncing, you might need to be a little bit more mindful of how much spill you've got. So you can see we have to cut the back of this just to avoid hitting the back wall. So now we've just moved the light even further to give us this really side-lit look. It is pretty cool, but it is fairly dramatic. And I would just say if you're planning to do this, I would probably want to try and have some sort of bounce or additional fill at hand just in case you need it. So you can really see how much of a difference having a little bit of bounce makes to that shot. And we get this look where she's mostly lit from one side with a little bit of fill on the other side and a bit more shadow in the middle of the face. The cool thing about this is that you can position your bounce according to how much fill you want in your shot.
One thing I want to add as well is that you may notice not getting much shine in her eyes, which is something to be noted. Now, you can get around this by putting a small light further away, which might just add a little bit of twinkle in her eye, but without actually changing your scene very much. There are movies like The Godfather where most of the shots didn't have any light in the eyes, and that was for dramatic effect. Now, that's not very popular these days, and I think we've probably moved a little bit beyond that, but it doesn't necessarily mean this is wrong.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong. There's just what you want to do.
Now, this is not a look you see very often, but you may see it in documentaries where they are trying to hide the identity of a subject. Basically, all we've done is taken the light completely off our subject and put it on the background, exposing the background but not our subject. There may be times in cinema where you do something along these lines to add mystery to a character for an opening shot or to show them watching someone else, but generally it's not that common.
This next look is called overhead lighting. We have our softbox directly above our actress and some blacks on the floor to stop any bounce light from coming up. This creates a very overbearing, dramatic look, with raccooning of shadows underneath the eyes generally. You see this a lot with interrogation scenes, and it's quite intense. This is for a very dramatic look, where you're not trying to go for beauty, you're trying to go for drama. Now, you could add some bounce below your subject to make your look a lot less intense. But in this case, we're going to use our white net to diffuse the light even further above her, softening that light, making it a lot more flattering, while still maintaining the drama of the scene. Really just softening those shadows. Generally, the more diffusion you have in front of your light, the softer it will be, the more flattering it will be.
So we started today shooting the shadow side, which means that we were shooting into the shadows. The shadows were sitting on the side of the face closest to camera. However, sometimes you want something that is a little bit more neutral, and so what you do is you move the light to the camera side and you shoot into the lit side of the face. The look can still be moody, but it does open a lot more of the face to light, so it can be a more welcoming feel. You might see this a lot of the time when you're shooting corporate videos. Sometimes a client doesn't want to look like they're coming out of the shadows to speak to their customers.
Some would also argue that it does make the face look a little bit fatter, which is not always flattering.
I think, sometimes it also depends on the location you're in. You kind of want a light from the side of camera that you can motivate with natural light or additional light. So really context is key. A lot of cinematographers will say shooting the shadow side is more cinematic, and most times I would agree, but there are times that you might want to do this. And it could even be used narratively. Sometimes you'll see this used in an interrogation scene, actually, if police are interviewing a subject. Depending on whether or not the filmmaker wants the subject to appear like they're telling the truth, they might frame most of the face in shadow or in light, and it's something very interesting to pay attention to.
If there's one thing to take from all of this, It's the thing that separates cinematographers from great cinematographers, and that's motivation. Now, this isn't just putting a lamp in a room so you have motivation from where to light your subject. It comes down to lens choice, angle, composition, the position each character is in the frame, and of course, the lighting. You should be asking yourself, what am I trying to tell the audience on a subconscious level about my characters, about their relation to the world that they're in, with how I am showing them this image? These are all things you should be considering every time you go to light, block, and shoot a scene.
100%. I like to say to people, it's not necessarily about what we're doing, it's why we convince ourselves what we're doing is the right thing to do. So that just about does it here. Taylor and I have walked you through a couple of simple lighting setups that you can do with one light and a couple of modifiers if you have them. There are obviously many ways to light a scene, but the main takeaway here is to think about why you're placing the light where you're placing it and move from there.